I opened the stove to clean out the ash. What I found made my hands shake. Russ hadn't set foot in the cabin for nearly 30 years. Not since Uncle Leo passed. Not since the funeral with 7 guests and a stale pot of coffee in the church basement. Not since the family drifted apart like smoke in November air, each of them quietly deciding to let the cabin rot. The place had sat there ever since, half forgotten and leaning into the trees like it wanted to fall asleep. The roof sagged in the middle. The paint was long gone. Even the porch had splinters sharp enough to draw blood if you weren't careful. But now it was his. Not by some heartfelt inheritance, just paperwork. A letter from a lawyer in Missoula. "Still in your name," the man had said. "You're the only living relative who hasn't signed it away." Russ had thought about selling it. Thought hard. But then came the layoff. Then the quiet days. Then that one morning when he was staring out the window, coffee going cold in his hand, and the thought crept in. Might as well go see the old place. No plans, no expectations. Just one man and a cabin full of memories nobody else wanted. He drove up in late September. The trees had just started to turn, flashes of gold in the pine. In the trunk, 2 boxes of trash bags, 1 crowbar, and a thermos full of lukewarm gas station coffee. On the passenger seat, a wrinkled legal envelope with the deed inside. The road was worse than he remembered. Potholes like craters, tree branches low and grabby. When the cabin finally came into view, Russ pulled over and stared for a full minute. It was still there, still crooked, still hunched against the wind, still wearing that rusted horseshoe over the door like a joke no one laughed at anymore. Unquote. Signed. Inside, it smelled like dust, old wood, and rodent piss. Not awful, just forgotten. Boxes were stacked to the ceiling. Tools, ropes, tins. He recognized some of them from when he was a kid. Leo never threw anything away. Spider webs draped across windows like curtains. On the wall, a calendar from 1957, yellowed and curled. Russ turned on the little battery-powered radio he'd brought, more out of habit than hope. Static. Then, a weak AM signal. He rolled up his sleeves and got to work. The first few hours passed quietly. He sorted through boxes, brushed off decades of grime, piled junk by the door, made mental notes of anything that might still be worth keeping. A pocket knife, a half-decent lantern, a box of unopened nails. Time moved weird in that place, like the air itself was heavier. It was late afternoon when he finally got to the cast iron stove. He hadn't thought about it in years, but seeing it now, the square belly, the tiny twisted handle, the flue still rusted open, it all came back. Uncle Leo cooking beans straight from the can, telling stories that went nowhere, grunting whenever he bent down to throw in another log. Russ crouched, opened the door. A puff of soot hit his face. He coughed, waved it away. Inside, it looked like it always had after winter. Ash, half-burnt wood, a couple of nails that had probably been used as makeshift kindling. He reached in with gloved hands, scooping, expecting nothing. And then he felt it. Not wood, not ash. Something soft, familiar. He pulled back. Brown leather gloves, old, the kind Leo always wore. Cracked and stiff now, like sun-dried bark. Beneath them, folded paper, dry and fragile, edges scorched. Russ sat back on his heels. The letter had been folded 3 times. The outside was blank, except for a faint pencil scrawl. "Russell, only if I'm gone." His breath caught. He looked toward the broken window where golden light poured in like honey. Dust danced in the beam. The whole cabin felt paused, as if it too was waiting. His hands trembled slightly. He turned the letter over once, just to feel its weight. It wasn't heavy, but it felt important. Then he opened it. The handwriting inside was rough, uneven, like it had been written in a hurry or with shaking hands. Russ had to tilt the page toward the light to make out the words. "Russell, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And if I'm gone, then you're the only one I trust to know." That stopped him cold. Leo had never been the emotional type, never said things like trust, never left notes. Hell, the man barely returned phone calls, and when he did, it was usually to complain about gas prices or those idiots on the radio. But this sounded like something else, like an admission. He rubbed his thumb along the crease of the paper. The ink had faded in spots. The smell was faint but distinct. Ashes and old paper, like it had been hidden too long in a place not meant for keeping things safe. He kept reading. "There's a box. You won't find it easy, but it's yours. I kept it for a reason. Look where we stacked the firewood that year it snowed in October. Under the old board, next to the root cellar hatch. The nails are rusted now. You'll need something to pry them." Russ blinked. Snow in October. He remembered that year. He was 10. Leo had cursed all week about the early frost, said it was the Rockies trying to swallow us early. They'd stacked wood in the corner, like a barricade. He looked toward that part of the cabin now. The stove sat to his right, quiet as a tomb. To the left, the far corner, dim and still. Something buzzed in his ears, a low, dull hum, like a warning, or maybe just adrenaline. He stood up, knees cracking. The floor groaned under him. He crossed the room, brushing aside dangling cobwebs and stepping around a busted chair that had collapsed inward like a dead animal. The corner was darker than he remembered. The windows on that side had yellowed with grime, and the late sun couldn't quite reach it. It smelled faintly of mold and old pine. He crouched, ran his hand across the warped floorboards. One felt different, shorter grain, fewer nails. He tapped it, hollow. Crowbar. He'd left it by the door. He stood, fetched it, came back. The board groaned as he wedged the bar beneath it and leaned in. Crack. Then a pop as the nails gave. He keeled it back like a scab. Underneath, earth. Dark, packed soil. A shallow cavity just wide enough for a shoebox. And resting in it, a metal tin, dull and dented, wrapped tightly in faded cloth. Wax clung to the edges of the fabric like dried blood. Russ hesitated. It felt wrong to move it, like unsealing something sacred. But he reached in anyway. The tin was cold and surprisingly heavy. Not jewelry box heavy, document heavy. He carried it to the workbench in the center of the room, brushing off sawdust and tools as he went. Set it down. The wax cracked under his fingers. The cloth peeled away, revealing a rusted hinge and an old padlock, snapped clean off long ago. He lifted the lid. Inside, stacks of folded paper, yellowed, thick stock, the kind you saw in banks or courthouses. And resting on top, a single envelope, no stamp, no return. Just 3 letters, FDL. He opened it. 1 page, short, neat. A list of dates, bank names, wire instructions, some kind of code, half letters, half numbers. A second list, unfamiliar names. A third, a P.O. box in Helena, Montana. And at the very bottom, scrawled in pen, Leo's unmistakable chicken scratch. Just in case I never made it back. Use it if you need it. I hope it still matters. Russ sat down slowly. The letter rested in his lap like it weighed 10 pounds. Leo hadn't just left behind junk and memories. He'd left a map. For a long time, he just sat there. The cabin creaked around him, like it was stretching its limbs after a long sleep. Dust floated in the angled light. Somewhere outside, a bird called once, then went quiet. Russ stared at the pages again, slowly, deliberately, trying to make sense of what he was holding. What kind of man hides something like this? What kind of life had Leo lived? Quiet, gruff, stubborn Leo, with banking codes and sealed tins and instructions that read like a Cold War spy thriller. He turned one page over. On the back was a sketch, a diagram maybe, hand-drawn lines connecting names and banks, a crude circle around a date, April 3rd, 1981. That was before Russ even hit high school. Another page listed a safety deposit number, and beneath it, a signature, not Leo's, a new name, Franklin D. Lowe. Russ said it out loud. The sound felt strange in the quiet room. He flipped through the rest of the documents, page after page. There were transactions, cancellations, a letter from a bank in Zurich, translated, notarized. A typed receipt from a Montana bank dated 1993, marked with a large red closed. What the hell was all this? He looked again at the envelope. FDL, Franklin D. Lowe. It had to be the same person. But Leo never mentioned anyone by that name. Not once. Why keep this? Why hide it here? Russ thought back. Leo had traveled some in the late 70s, had taken a train west once, stayed in Reno, came back with new boots and a busted tooth. But nothing ever serious, nothing ever this. He felt suddenly like he was trespassing, like this wasn't meant for him after all. But then again, it was. That's what the note said. Only if I'm gone. He folded the papers carefully, put them back in the tin. His fingers brushed the leather gloves as he closed the lid. Leo had worn those gloves to work on engines, to chop wood, to dig fence posts when the ground was still frozen. Now they sat here, charred and quiet, like the hands had gone cold decades ago. Russ stood. His legs felt heavy. He carried the tin to the counter near the window, where the light was stronger. And for the first time in hours, he looked at his reflection in the glass. He didn't recognize his own face, not because it had changed, but because something behind his eyes had shifted. Leo had left him more than a box. He'd left him a question. That wasn't unusual, but it meant whoever used it didn't want to be found. All wasn't unusual. Next, he drove to the nearest real bank, one with clean floors and bulletproof glass. He stepped up to the counter with a dry mouth and the documents in a manila folder. "I'm trying to understand something my uncle left me," he said. "These codes, this account." The teller blinked. She called a manager. The manager came out, took one look, and his eyes changed. "I think we need to make a call," the man said quietly. "Would you mind stepping into my office?" Russ followed, sat down. The chair creaked under him. 10 minutes later, the manager returned, sat across from him. No smile. "Mr. Langley, you say your uncle was Leo Langley?" "Yes." The man hesitated, then opened a drawer and pulled out a black binder. He turned to a tab marked dormant. "Do you know a Franklin D. Lowe?" "No. I mean, I don't think so. It's in the papers my uncle left." The manager nodded. "We've seen that name before." He turned the binder so Russ could see. There it was, a line item. F.D. Lowe, safe deposit box. Opened 1981. Inactive since 1993. "No one's touched it in 30 years, the manager said. "But it's still there. Contents sealed." Russ stared. "What's in it?" "We don't know." were not allowed to open unless by order or registered access. And I don't count? Not unless you're listed. The man pulled a slip of paper, checked something, then frowned. You are. What? Leo Langley signed access rights to you. Dated 1994. You were 18. Russ blinked. He never told me. Well, the manager said softly, he did, and it's valid. He reached for a form. You'll need ID, and we'll need to escort you. The box is in the vault. Russ felt the weight of it in his bones, like the air was thicker now. He nodded. Let's go. They walked through 2 locked doors and 1 elevator that buzzed like a heart monitor. The vault was quiet, cold, metallic. The manager used 2 keys. The box slid out with a scrape. It was long, heavy. Russ carried it to the table, sat down. His fingers trembled. He opened it. Inside, another envelope, and beneath it, bundles. Old currency, sealed documents, certificates, an envelope from Zurich, a stamped title, bonds. He picked up the top envelope and opened it. Inside, a letter, typed, precise. Mr. Lowe, this confirms your converted holdings have been transferred to account ending in 0371. Valuation to date is $3.2 million USD, adjusted for international exchange and maturity as of April 1981. Russ's throat went dry. There was more. A contract, a transfer document with Leo's signature, and a single note in Leo's handwriting scratched at the bottom of the page. Knew you'd find it. Use it better than I did. Russ sat frozen. $3.2 million. Not in theory, not in a story, not in a dream. Real. The bundle in front of him contained more than he'd made in 30 years of carpentry, side gigs, and seasonal work. He touched the envelope again, just to feel it. The weight, the texture, the heat that pulsed beneath the paper like it still carried Leo's fingerprints. How long had this been sitting here? What kind of life had his uncle lived to let something like this sit untouched? It made no sense. Back at the cabin, Russ laid everything out on the workbench like a forensic investigator. Documents, bonds, titles, foreign bank receipts, a Zurich certificate dated 1978, a hand-signed agreement with a man named Lowe. The signature matched Leo's. There was no denying it. But Leo had been broke. Always. He'd eaten beans out of cans and kept a blanket nailed over the door to save heat. He never spent money on anything but fuel, jerky, and AM radio batteries. Why leave this behind? Why never touch it? Russ couldn't stop thinking about it. He barely ate, slept worse than ever. One morning, he woke up on the floor with a document stuck to his arm. Something had to be done. So he started making calls. First, the bank. He asked about liquidation, taxes, legal claims, inheritance structure. The man on the phone coughed and said, "I'd recommend a lawyer." So Russ found one, a woman named Porter. Gray suit, sharp voice, no time for nonsense. He brought the whole box to her office. She read every line, every receipt, didn't speak for 45 minutes. Finally, she looked up. "Mr. Langley," she said, "do you have any idea what this is?" He shook his head. She leaned forward. "This isn't just inheritance. This is asset laundering, old school, pre-digital. It looks like your uncle was part of a blind trust, possibly under an alias. Franklin D. Lowe may not even exist." Russ blinked. She continued. "These accounts, these holdings, they were masked behind offshore transfers, staggered dates. Someone built this to stay hidden. But why? Because that's what people do when they don't want anyone asking where the money came from." Russ swallowed. "How bad are we talking?" She smiled thinly. "Not criminal, not anymore. Just complicated." She helped him start the paperwork, a process, she said, that would take months, maybe years. But Russ didn't care, because every page he turned felt like another brick in the wall of a life he never knew his uncle had. A month later, he got a package. It was postmarked from Zurich. No return address. Inside, a single photograph, black and white, mid-1960s. Leo, in a suit, standing next to a man with sunglasses and a cigarette. Behind them, a building marked Banca Privata. Leo was smiling. On the back, in blue ink, "Frankie owed me, but I owed you." Russ stared at it for a long time. It was the first time he realized something simple. This wasn't an accident. Leo had planned all of it. Standing next to a man with sunglasses, in a cigarette. Behind them, a building marked Banca Privata. Leo was smiling. On the back, in blue ink, "Frankie owed me, but I owed you." Russ stared at it for a long time. It wasn't. One morning, as he was stacking firewood, his phone rang. Unknown number. He answered. A pause. Then a voice. Male, European. "Mr. Langley, we believe you may be in possession of an item that belongs to our foundation. It's regarding the Zurich agreement." Russ froze. "What item?" A silence. Then, low and deliberate. "Let's not pretend." The call ended. He looked down at the tin box, then at the firewood, the ground, the forest beyond, because that's when it hit him. The box wasn't the only. Hey, wanna know what else he finds? You know what to do. Subscribe to the channel. Russ spent the next 2 days turning the cabin upside down. He pulled up floorboards, checked under cabinets, emptied old crates that hadn't been touched in decades. Nothing. But it wasn't nothing. Not anymore. Because once you know a secret exists, you see signs of it everywhere. And Leo had always been good at secrets. It was an old tool chest in the shed that finally gave him something. Rusty, padlocked, hidden behind a false panel in the wall, behind a tarp marked "Trap Parts." Russ had nearly given up when he tugged the tarp and saw the glint of brass. He cracked the lock with a borrowed crowbar. Inside, a smaller box wrapped in oilcloth. A name scratched into the top with a nail. FDL. He opened it with trembling hands. Inside, 2 things. A leather-bound journal and a velvet pouch. He opened the pouch first. Coins, gold, European, pre-war. Some he recognized from history books, Reichsmarks, francs, and a heavy Austrian coin with a crowned eagle. He stared, then opened the journal. It wasn't Leo's handwriting. It was tidy, European, full sentences, records, a log, meetings, dates, transfers, mentions of Havana, Geneva, Caracas, deals, cash swaps, diplomatic handoffs. And then, midway through, met L in Reno. Smart, quiet, honest, could be useful, testing trust. And later, L agreed, gave him Montana property, final storage in place, told him it's his if things go wrong. And finally, signed over title. L understands risk. I trust him. Russ flipped to the last page. A photo was tucked inside, faded color, early 70s. Leo, smiling, standing next to the same man from the Zurich photo. Younger, no glasses, holding a briefcase. Underneath, Franklin, 1972. Russ sat there a long time. The coins were real, the journal unmistakable. Leo hadn't just stumbled into money. He had been part of something. A witness, a holder, maybe even a protector. And when it got too heavy or too dangerous, he walked away, hid it all, left it to Russ. Not to make him rich, but to make sure the truth survived. Unpack it. It took 6 months to catalog the find. The coins were valued at over $500,000. The journal, priceless to historians. A foundation in Switzerland reached out, offering a private agreement. Russ took it. He didn't want headlines, didn't want attention. He sold the coins, donated the journal under a pseudonym, took what he needed, gave the rest away. And the rest? He rebuilt the cabin. Not fancy, just solid, warm. And every fall, when the leaves turned gold and the light got low, he'd take the tin box from the shelf, pour a drink, and sit by the stove. Not to mourn, to remember. Leo had trusted him, and trust, he realized, was the real inheritance all along.